Hi guys, in this video I'm going to talk to you about gradient maps. So I'm just going to cover the basics of gradient maps, so how to use them, how to install them, and a few different ways you can get some different results from gradient maps. The pack I'm going to be showing in this video is this one, Overtone 2. I'm just showing this one because it's got a ton of gradient maps in it, as you can see. Loads of different effects I can show you just with this pack alone. Obviously, what I'm talking about in this video will apply to any other pack of gradient maps you might have got from me or anyone else. First thing to cover is when you download gradient maps, they come in this format, which is a GRD file. So to install a GRD file, all you need to do in Windows is double click this file while you have Photoshop open. Now on Mac and on older versions of Photoshop, this doesn't always work. So if that didn't work, open up your gradient editor. You can do that by creating a gradient map and double clicking on the actual gradient. Sorry if you heard my cat. And then once you've got this open, just below OK and cancel and below the X at the top, there's a button that says import. So you can click on that and just browse to wherever you've saved the GRD file and just open it like that. And then it will appear, the pack will appear in your gradient editor. So I've obviously already done that. I've already created a gradient map layer. I've got this layer here, which is just a basic black to white gradient. It's the exact same as the gradient I've got loaded at the bottom of the gradient editor here. So if I pull this color stock into the middle, same happens on this layer. Obviously you can see the image in the background is changing too. If I put a color in the middle, it's doing the same. If I click through, obviously you'll see the gradient changing on both the layer and the background image. So that's basically what gradient maps do. I'm sure a lot of people knew that, but if you are entirely new to them, that was for you. So I'm just going to pick one that I actually want to use for this video, and I'm going to go with this one. Just put that back where it was. So a gradient map is an adjustment layer, which means it shows up in your layers palette in here, and you can pull it down so it's only affecting certain layers, or you can have it at the top so it affects everything in your document. It also works with blend modes, so you can select darken and it looks a bit more realistic on the background image. Overlay, again, difference looks kind of weird, so will all these other ones. Exclusion, subtract and divide. In my opinion, the best blend mode or gradient maps are these four at the bottom, so hue, saturation, color and luminosity. The way they separate the colors and stuff, it is immediately recognizable that you're using a gradient map. Sometimes it pulls out kind of a grainy texture from the image, and sometimes you can get some weird shapes that you didn't really see there before if you're using stock photos or a render or anything like that. So the four blend modes at the bottom, I like to use to just make it look more like you've just edited the photo. This looks more like I've spent a while just editing the picture than this does. So that's the blend mode hue. Saturation as well. You'll see a lot of people who make this kind of weird gradient-y artwork with like the humans in. A lot of that will use something like this where it's a gradient map with a blend mode like saturation or color. If I leave it on saturation and if I just click through some gradients, you'll see the colors are kind of staying the same because the colors are coming from the stock photo. They're not coming from the gradient map. It's just the saturation that's coming from the gradient map. So if you had a bunch of really desaturated colors here on the left of the gradient map, but some really saturated colors on the right, then the darker parts of the image would be desaturated, the lighter parts of the image would be more saturated. If I just go grey and grey on the left, but then if I go all the way on the right with a saturated color, you end up with the edges here that were showing up blue in some of the other gradients. It's just grey now because it's desaturated, and the middle of the photo is showing, it's got all these cool pink shapes on the clouds, stuff like that. Another thing I just wanted to cover in this video is you will see in a lot of the gradient maps I make these color stops where the color changes instantly rather than gradually. I have it in a load of them. It's one of my favorite ways to create gradient maps. I'll just put this back to normal so you can see what it's doing. So on here it goes from grey to black to green to light green. So a lot of people ask like how they can do that because the black doesn't show up. So it is quite literally just putting the black color stock on top of the green one. Or you'll see here at the bottom there is a little box where you can fill in the location. So if I pull this black color stop around, you'll see the percentages changing. 100% is if you have the color stop all the way on the right. 0% is if you have it all the way on the left. So if I type 50 in that box and then get another one and type 50 again, it's going to put them both in the same spot. That's the first way to do it. Second way to do it is on any gradient map between the two color stops, you have this little kind of diamond shape. You can pull this, all right, if you pull it from the black toward the green, the transition from green to black is going to sort of favor one color or the other. So if you move the midpoint around, it gives you a similar effect. if you don't want to mess around with all that, if you do go to my website and go to studioAAA.com, there's this pack called Make Your Own Maps, which is a pack of blank gradient maps. So they're just black to white, but I've gone and put all the color stops in already. So all you have to do is fill in the colors. And the last thing I just wanted to show, again, I'll just pick like a more appropriate gradient map for this, like this one. Obviously, I've got these text layers here. So I've got the little one that says studioAAA.com, and I've got the logo one. So gradient maps work over the top of layer styles. So if you apply a layer style, I'll just hide the stock photo for this bit. If you apply a layer style like outer glow, you can start getting this cool kind of outline on whatever your layer is, depending on how you set up the glow. Again, like opacity and stuff like that matters in this one, but this is something I did a lot when I create the artwork for the actual gradient maps. Sometimes you can pick like a gray color and it will output some different effects, or you can double up and have an outer glow in white and then do a stroke in black with an inner glow like this in black to create some weird effects. Now obviously if we disable the gradient map, you can see where the effect's coming from. So because, like I spoke about before, the gradient map is affecting black to white, when you start making things glow or when you start adding shadows, that's when the gradient map can start affecting text or shape layers in just a more interesting way. And the last thing I just want to cover, in pretty much all the artwork you've seen where I'm using gradient maps, if I just get one that's a bit more appropriate for this. So if you have your gradient map as your top layer, go below it and put a curves adjustment layer here. So obviously you can see here as I edit the curves, the gradient maps moving around. So you can create some really weird effects by doing some really messy curves that you would never do usually. You can see how the gradient map kind of doubles up in the background. So it's kind of going in on itself. If I just show this without the gradient map, obviously it looks weird, but once you put the gradient map on top, you can see how they're kind of folding back in on themselves and it just looks a bit more unique. Now, obviously when you install gradient maps, they're not just usable as gradient maps. You can use them in the gradient overlay editor, in the layer styles. If you go on the left and change your fill bucket to gradient tool, you can use the gradient maps to do a fill layer like this. They're usable anywhere that a gradient is usable in Photoshop. So it's not just gradient maps, even though they might have been made for that, you can use them for anywhere that will accept a gradient in Photoshop. That was just kind of the basics on gradient maps. If you want to get started with them, obviously I've got the free ones. If you can't be bothered making loads of them, you can obviously have a look at all the other ones we've got. I did just release a video on the gradient map effects kit, which shows you a bit more about using them. I'll put that on the screen at the end, and I'll put a link to that, to this page in the description. So hopefully this helped. If you want to keep up to date with everything we're doing, just go to studioAAA.com and put your email address in that box just above where the camera is. You'll be notified every time we release a new free product or anytime we're doing anything worth talking about. Hopefully this helped, and thanks for watching.